How did ancient humans get drunk? Before bottles, before bars, before anyone even had a word for it, ancient humans were getting drunk for a very, very long time. The oldest known alcoholic drink traces back at least 9,000 years, but the real story starts much earlier than that, long before anyone brewed anything on purpose, before the first pot was ever made. Something rotting on the ground was doing the work, and some ancient animal or human noticed it made them feel different. That moment changed everything. Here is how it actually worked. Today, you crack open a drink without thinking about it. The can, the glass, the whole system, it just works. But go back far enough and none of that existed. The oldest hard evidence of an alcoholic drink comes from Jiahu, a village site in central China. Researchers found pottery jars there dating to around 7000 BC. The jars still had chemical residue inside them. Rice, honey, hawthorn fruit, fermented together. Someone in central China 9,000 years ago was deliberately making alcohol. But that is just the oldest jar we found. Jars rot, jars break, jars get buried and lost for thousands of years. The drinking happened long before the container. Our primate cousins, the great apes, seek out fermented fruit deliberately. They know what it does. They choose it anyway. That instinct is at least 10 million years old. Homo sapiens, modern humans like you, have only existed for around 300,000 years. The taste for fermented things was ancient before we were. So what exactly was fermentation, and how did early humans stumble into it? Fermentation is just yeast eating sugar. Yeast, a tiny living fungus, is everywhere. It lands on fruit, it eats the sugar, it makes alcohol and gases waste. That is it. No brewer needed, no recipe, no pot. Ripe fruit falls, yeast does its job. Puddle of mild alcohol sits on the ground. This happened every single season for millions of years, and early humans, walking on that same forest floor, kept eating it, not by accident, by preference. Fermented fruit has more calories, it was easier to digest, and it made you feel warm. For a hunter-gatherer, someone who walked 10 miles a day with no food guarantee, that mattered enormously. The body that craves a cold beer after work, that body evolved on the forest floor. Chasing calories, chasing warmth, chasing that feeling. So when did humans go from finding fermented fruit on the ground to actually making alcohol? The answer lives in the Neolithic, the farming era that began roughly 12,000 years ago. Humans stopped moving constantly and started staying put. They grew grain, they stored it, and when stored grain gets wet, it starts to ferment. Someone tasted the wet grain mash, and that someone liked it. This is almost certainly how grain-based alcohol, what we now call beer, was first discovered. Beer, or something very much like it, before wheat fields, before mills, before ovens. Some archaeologists now argue that grain was first farmed not for bread, but for beer. The grain went into the pot before it went into the oven. Now, how did they actually brew it? Step 1. Chew the grain. Human saliva contains amylase, enzymes that break grain starch into sugar. Chew grain, spit it into a pot, add water. Wait, this technique still exists today in South America and parts of Africa. Ancient Peruvians called it chicha. Ancient Egyptians used baked grain loaves soaked in water to start fermentation. Workers who built the pyramids were paid partly in beer, 4 to 5 liters a day per worker. Not for fun, for calories, for hydration, for safety. Alcohol killed the bacteria in dirty water. In a world before clean water, a world before filters, pipes, or treatment, fermented drinks were often safer than the river. Ancient Sumerians, the first known civilization in what is now Iraq, had a dedicated goddess of beer. Her name was Ninkasi. There was a hymn written in her honor, and the hymn was also a beer recipe. The oldest written beer recipe in human history is also a love song to the goddess of brewing. That tells you something important. Alcohol was never just a drink. It was sacred. It was communal. It was medicine, currency, and ritual all at once. Every ancient culture that produced grain produced beer. China, Egypt, Mesopotamia, pre-Columbian America, all of them independently made it. Not because they copied each other, because fermenting grain is what happens when you store grain near water. The physics of biology did it for them. Now, here is the part that nobody puts in the textbook. Alcohol might actually be the reason civilization exists. Not a small claim, but a serious one. Around 11,000 to 600 years ago, people built a massive stone temple complex in what is now Turkey. It is called Göbekli Tepe, the oldest known ceremonial site in the world. It predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years and built by hunter-gatherers, people with no permanent homes, no farms, no written language. Archaeologists found enormous stone vats at the site, large enough to hold hundreds of liters. The residue inside, grain, fermented. Thousands of people came to this site together, and someone brewed beer for all of them. That changes the question from why did they drink to why did they build? Maybe they didn't build the temple to gather. Maybe they gathered to drink, and the temple came after. The drunken monkey hypothesis, yes, that is its real name, suggests our taste for alcohol evolved as a survival tool. The idea is simple. Animals that liked the smell of fermented fruit found riper, more calorie-dense food. They survived better, they had more offspring. Over millions of years, the preference got baked into the genome, the inherited instruction book for the body, which means that craving is not a weakness, it is an inheritance. But here is the other side. Ancient people did not have liver disease from beer because ancient beer was weak. 1 to 3% alcohol, closer to a sour porridge than a modern drink. You ate it as much as you drank it. It was soup, it was bread, it was booze, all in one pot. Children drank it, pregnant women drank it, elderly people drank it, because the alternative, plain water from a shared river, could kill you. Weak fermented grain drink was the safest thing to swallow. Every morning, every meal, every day. Your last drink, whatever it was, sits at the end of a very long chain. That chain stretches back past Ninkasi and her hymn, past the stone vats of Göbekli Tepe, past the pottery jars of Jiahu, all the way back to a forest floor where a primate found a rotten fig and decided it was worth eating again. Across 10 million years of evolution, humans and the ancestors before them kept choosing the fermented thing, not because they were weak, because the fermented thing kept them alive, fed them, hydrated them, gave them a reason to build something together. The next time you raise a glass, you are doing something your ancestors did around a fire, in a cave, 10,000 years ago. The recipe changed. The impulse never did.